piece which I wrote today, and I would like to start by saying, stop blaming the new younger Arab leaders for Gaza, for Palestine, or for the weakest state of the Muslim nations. It's a collective blame. We all carry this burden, and the perceived inaction from Arab states regarding the Gaza genocide stems from ingrained, colonized thought processes to develop and work around the whole logic of divide and rule. They divide us and they rule over us. So basically what we have to remember is that if you're looking at the Middle East per se, and or the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa region, that region is, the killing fields. It has been a war field. And if you step into that theater, it's a theater of absolute devastation and destruction for more than 100 years. Since the colonization of most of the states there, if you look at Iraq, if you look at Syria, if you look at Palestine, and then of course the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, with that, it was the typical behavior of these racist settler colonial states, and of course the international system at that point, which was governed by racist white supremacist dominated states like the US. If you look at France, if you look at Germany, all of them have a white supremacist agenda. That understanding that the white is superior to any other creation or to any other human being, symbolically then of course internalized in the way in which the Zionists today represent themselves. God's chosen people, a strange God it is that chooses such a destructive, evil, vindictive, nasty people. This has been the foundation. It has undergirded the entire development of nation states across the world, including Africa. After the colonialists left, we are left with neocolonialism, and we see how states were selectively and arbitrarily divided, and resources have continuously been plundered. Most of these incursions, if you look at the entire map of the world, where most of the damage has been caused, but the majority of the people are still suffering, is in those places where those countries are resource rich. So if you have oil, gold, platinum, cobalt, those kinds of minerals. And it is, if you look at the Europeans and the Anglo-Saxon nations, they have made a nation for themselves. They have elevated themselves on the murder, the blood, the sweat, and the resources of the states which they have plundered. So this is the background, the historical context. It is not to say that Western states have been progressive, that they are better than anybody else. They're only they have been able to develop because they have suppressed everybody else. They have been able to develop because they've stolen the resources and instituted, fake regimes and ja boss, what we say in Afrikaans here in South Africa, or yes boss, puppet regimes throughout the world, regimes who do their bidding. So unfortunately, yes, we have agency, so we are to blame that we have allowed this to happen to our countries, and that we have allowed these powers to come in and do that to us. Well, let me say how the different acts in the play have played out. And so what we're seeing today in Gaza is just a continuation of that particular domination, that particular usurpation of people's rights, of their resources, and of continuous control. We know that the Zionists are not religious people. Majority of them don't even believe in a God. So to claim that it's Judea, Samaria, all of those things is just absolute nonsense. That is the smokescreen. What they do want is they want to continuously steal the land because they know that there are very many benefits to that land. They have ample resources that they can steal from that land. And now from Gaza, there is the offshore gas fields, which they are dying to get into and expand, of course, their theft, this grand scheme of thieving and lying. That's what I call these states, gangster states, because they excel in lying and they excel in stealing. So they have now, and of course, to get all of these resources out, they need to secure themselves. And the Russian-Ukraine conflict has shown without a doubt that they are totally dependent on the waterways, and these waterways, very particular waterways, are governed by mostly Muslim majority countries. Now, they don't want that. They don't want to be in a situation where they do not have control. So Gaza is the ideal solution. One, to build the Ben Gurion Canal, and two, to extract the gas resources. BP has already been given the contract to go and explore for these gases off the Gaza coast. there is far more context to what we see in what is happening in the Middle East than what we have come to understood. And sadly, Muslims are paying the price because we have been governed. Muslim majority countries have been governed by very poor leaders without vision, without an understanding of the value of their own societies, the value of their own traditions. Leaders who thought that it was better to emulate the West, the same mistake that the Ottomans made, thinking that we substitute one for the other, not realizing that what they had was superior, which has cost them tremendously. The first fundamental mistake was to fix their currencies to the dollar. The second was to agree to a trade of their oil, their resources, based on the dollar, which has become established as the petrodollar, essentially locking themselves into full domination, subjugation, and control by the US. And all of this is linked to the banking system. It's being linked to the way in which the economies of the world are divided, and how Western states decide who will prosper and who will not. But ultimately, the bottom line is this, that no matter how you look at it, the only people who prosper from this subjugation, this domination, this constant conflict, these killing fields in the Middle East, are certain political elite in many of the supremacist Western states. So all of this are factors that need to be considered when we make any assumption or analysis of what is happening. For the longest of time, Sarah, it has been that we have been clouded by the noise that has been coming from the mainstream media. That was the only source of information and news that we had. And most of them are controlled by a handful of oligarchs. So these media fed us the information that they wanted to feed us. That information that has been fed to us is also a means of indoctrination, one, but also of destabilizing us and debilitating us, making us feel insecure, lose our confidence, not understanding. And when we don't understand, when you don't have knowledge, when you're not aware of the full context, you begin to feel hopeless. And the best way to subjugate populations and to control regions and to control people is to make them feel hopeless. Now, the new social media, the new access to information, we are getting information from parts of the world which we never got before. And we're beginning to see different pictures. And one of those different pictures is the rise of young Arab leaders, most specifically in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, Jordan, and UAE. These are young leaders who have been schooled in the West, who have interacted with the West, and have studied the West. Most specifically, they have studied the tactics of the US. They have studied the way in which the Zionists operate and control the domination, that control and dominate the Middle East, and also the narrative. For all of us who have been to Arab lands, who visited the Middle East, nobody can dispute the kind of people that the Arab people are. They're a Gentile, loving people, very gentle, very loving, very generous, hospitable. But there's one single thing about them that I think is indisputable, is that they love their families and they love their children. If you understand this about the culture of Arab people, then you can certainly say with 100% certainty that when they see what is happening in Palestine, there is no way that they're going to feel okay about it. So the fact that we're getting information to try and convince us that they're okay about it, that they don't care about Gaza, that they don't care about the Palestinians, that they only want to do this, want to excel here, want to modernize there, want to secure this, secure that. There's more to that story than anybody who knows the Arabs will begin to accept as a reality. And it was all of these factors that made me sit down and think carefully about what is happening in the Middle East, and to assess the situation and to ask, is this really what it is? Are the Arab leaders so hopeless? Are they really deserting Palestine? Are they really allowing this to happen just, for, how shall we say, because they don't care? Or is it because they're more interested in the money? And I realized that it was not there. And certainly it was that first the hands were tied. Secondly, they've taken over power, or they've come into positions of power where they have to now reassess the entire changed global landscape. They have to look at how international relations have been forged, at which countries are allies, at who is assisting and who is not, who is constantly making conflict and who is not. And then they have to ask themselves, how do we maneuver in this where we are actually completely hamstrung? And they are hamstrung by the global hegemon, the United States. If you look at what the United States did to Iran, what it did to Afghanistan, when these states refused to bow down, they imposed sanctions on them. The same as what they did now with Ukraine and Russia. They did it to Russia, imposed sanctions, they freeze their assets. And with Iran and Afghanistan, they've stolen billions of dollars from these two nations. Just as that can happen, has happened to those two states, it can happen to the other Arab states as well, who don't toe the line or who intentionally go against what it is that the US and Israel are trying to achieve. So when Israel speaks, it is two voices, forked tongues. Both Israel and US are saying the same thing. And when US speaks, it's forked tongue, again, two voices. It's the US and Israel. They're both saying the same thing. And essentially, these are two of the vilest, most horrendous, most brutal, and shall I say, racist states at the moment that are dominating in the international system of states. And it is up to the rest of the world to stand up and make a choice. Is this who we are? Is this how we represent ourselves? Is this our humanity? Because, Europeans have always claimed that they are a civilized people, that they have values and they have respect, that they respect human rights, that they are sorry and they feel terrible and have remorse about the colonial plunders and the harm that they have done in their past. But Gaza has shown that there is very little remorse. And there's only few states who actually have progressed, shall I say, to the point of civilization and humanity. So all of these factors need to consider, we have to consider all of these factors. The trade routes, we have to look at how the Bretton Woods institutes work, the IMF and the loans that it's making to Egypt and how it's trying to control over the assets of Egypt. Of course, failure to take control over the Suez Canal is also one of the reasons why they want to develop the Ben Gurion Canal. Considering these various moves and the shift, we see the shift in the alignment with the Arab states, specifically with those that have recently joined BRICS, and now it's BRICS Plus. Why did they rotate? Why did they shift towards BRICS? China doesn't have any foreign bases anywhere in the world. China has not made war on any of the European states. China has not entered any of the African or Middle Eastern states and caused conflict in them. The only troublemakers in the world are the US, in many instances backed by certain European states, and of course with their most significant ally, which is essentially the 50-odd state of the United States, and that is Israel.